And so we ask ourselves, will our actions echo across the centuries?
All right, Longhouse with the key Latinx here, Geo.
How dare you?
And
Latinx was my father.
Don't call me by my father's name. And then we got two other guys here if you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
So I'm Cameron. I'm part of the Pines Contingency group where we're out of the Pacific Northwest and we run around the woods and do clown shit together.
And I'm Marshall, and I'm also part of the Pines Contingency group.
Sweet. So, I get a lot of questions from people asking, like, how do I start my group and stuff like that. So I guess how did you guys kind of meet and start that?
So, Marshall, if you want to take this one, you've been doing it for a lot longer than I have.
Yeah. You know, I would say I kind of got into training on my own after I left the military, like circa 2016. And, I was like looking for a place to kind of continue education like you see in the community today, kind of. But I would say during like that year, things were like a little bit different, like especially like, politically and like, especially like socially on Instagram networks and stuff. So it was kind of hard to connect with people, but I ended up linking up with some like veteran buddies of mine, and we like started a little crew and trained for a while. And people kind of come in, come out. They see what you're doing, and they eventually just kind of want to try it on for size like themselves. Yeah. And that's eventually, I think, how like groups come together and or split. And so I also get like a lot of questions sometimes about, what do you do? Your crew's so tight. Like, how do you do it? And I'm like, well, people just kind of come and go. And the people who are really dedicated to like continuing education or like a specific purpose will stick around. And so I think the important people that I would like train with really stuck around, and we kept the crew kind of low key for a while. And then it kind of sprouted back to life.
We're getting the band back together, PCG, boys.
Yeah, kind of. The PCG came together, and now we're a lot more like prominent on like social media and stuff, and about sharing that information with that page. So,
okay.
Yeah. For me, it's kind of it's kind of an organic journey.
Do you guys both run the page, or does one of you guys primarily?
No, so I do most of the media stuff, and I always am asking the other members of the group, like, hey, if you have any topics that you want to cover, if you feel like you're an SME and sort of this or that, write a post and we'll talk about it. Because one, the page is about, cool pics, and we have that going on for sure, or at least I think we do. And then two, it's about knowledge sharing. So we've covered stuff that we think is in our wheelhouse, specific considerations for operating in the PNW, and then stuff that we don't think has been talked about very much. Because, a couple years ago, a couple months ago, this stuff wasn't talked about at all. But now there's a whole sect of Instagram that is just covers ad nauseum, in depth, in detail, every aspect of mission planning and contingencies and like how to filter water. We're trying not to cover posts that people have ad nauseum covered before, like the whole water filtration thing. Like you read the manual back of the aqua tabs, you know how to filter water. But stuff that we see that people aren't really thinking about, or specific, things to our group that we have found to work, we will try to, info share and make more available to people who may not have thought about certain ideas or ways of doing things.
Yeah, that's fair. Because that's the other thing too, is just like, like you said, there's a lot of guys now that are posting different types of info, and some of it's useful and some of it's not as useful. But like, I mean, that's how, you know, me and Gio met for the most part. Was through like online and stuff like that. And we knew each other kind of before you started your page, but you know, there's a lot of other guys that I met too, just as like, hey, you're posting good stuff. You just start talking to them, and it's cool because you can see that there's definitely an upshift, and like the whole like Second Amendment thing was, you know, years ago, or not even years like that, but just even in our childhood, it seemed like it was a lot more for hunting and stuff. And then like for me, at least, once I started kind of approaching like high school and toward the end of high school, it was more like, okay, now this is like your home defense kind of setup, or like, you know, that's when the like the bug out bag videos and the EDC type stuff was really popular. So the guys would be like, oh, this is my get home bag in case something happens. And then it turned into like, you know, well, now my get home bag is turned into, you know, plate carriers and armor and all that stuff. And then now it's like guys are better equipped than most of the military individuals, and you know, they're posting about how to do mission planning, like you said, how to do full-blown executions of different types of missions depending on your environment, and kind of like a MET-TC analysis and all that. So it is cool to kind of see the upshift and like seriousness, and the fact that like the Second Amendment isn't just for hunting or for collecting like World War II guns. It's about, you know, everything else that guys like us are starting to talk about now.
Yeah, I think the more and more the world gets crazy, the more and more we really return to the true sense of the Second Amendment, which is, you know, what it says. It's hunting tyrants and making sure that the status quo stays with the people and not the government.
Yeah, I'm sure that probably like the recession in like 08, 09 is probably what kind of started this uptick, now that I think of it, because I think that's when guys started realizing that, you know, if things get much worse, then that's when you start getting power outages and rioting and looting and stuff like that. So they're like, okay, well, now I'm going to need a way to where if I'm at work, then I have like a basic set of supplies to get home. And then that's kind of where, like, you know, the videos of like Such or whoever else like putting in their bug out bag, and like James Yeager doing his like videos of everybody just mag dumping into sand.
You know, you may give credit to all those guys, but I think the real guy to give credit to is Nothing Fancy.
Dude, 100%.
He's the OG, man. He is the OG of all of this.
The funniest thing, the funniest thing too about Nothing Fancy is that I remember being in like end of middle school, early high school, and I always thought that guns were cool, and I always had like a fascination with them. I always wanted to join the military. And
Terrorist.
Yeah, exactly. It all started from this PC game that my dad bought me from Big Lots one time, and it was called Viet Cong, and it was some like Vietnam era first person shooter that was made like the Czech Republic or something. Dude, this game is so good. If they made a remastered version tomorrow, I would spend a lot of money on it. Like, it is such a good game. But that started like a huge fascination with guns and stuff. But anyway, you know, my dad was in the Army, and he didn't buy an AR until after I did. But he would like watch these Nothing Fancy videos where they'd be like running these little courses in the desert with like mini 14s and like Condor plate carriers. And he's like,
yes.
He'd always be like, man, that looks really cool. That'd be fun to do. And now I'm like, hey, like, I'll show my dad pictures from like our trips, and I'll be like, oh yeah, like, you know, we were doing this and that, and I'll show him, you know, every time that I get like a new gun build or setup or something, I'll show him, and he's like, oh, this is sweet. But I don't know, he doesn't like go out and train or anything. He just like goes for runs all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is funny. Like, I remember sitting in the living room at like, you know, 9 a.m. on a fucking Saturday or something, just like watching Nothing Fancy videos on the TV, and just like, you know, like, yeah, it looks sweet as he's like shooting a mini 14 up a mountain.
Wearing lawnmower earmuffs and stuff.
Yeah.
We made a drinking game out of his videos. It's like, you know, take a shot if he says like without rule of law, and like POU. Yeah. And like
every time he says
playing makes an appearance.
if Bucket Nuster comes on the channel, you gotta like drink your whole beer or some shit. Like
I remember there was one where he did where I can't remember like what the video was, but he had like one of his friends come out and this dude was wearing like a tactical kilt and he had like 16 knives on him, and this guy was like he was like a battle dwarf, like he was just short and fat, and he would just like run these courses with like the cleanest AR-15 build I've ever seen in my life, and it was
Typical
just funny.
beer.
Yeah, I need to find that video and just like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna upload the whole video, the whole like, it's probably like a 6-hour video on Instagram and just sections of reels. So each one is like a minute long.
Your account's gonna get closed for spam.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
this is one Nut and Fancy video.
I'm gonna be down because of Nut and Fancy and everybody else that's like, oh, I'll be your sugar mama, and it's really some guy that lives in like Nicaragua is like still just running around commenting on videos or posts.
God bless.
But yeah, that's funny. I always like, I don't know. I have like a soft spot in my heart for Nut and Fancy. Like if I'm at work, I'll like watch YouTube in the background while I'm doing shit. And sometimes like a Such video will come on like on the autoplay and I just get mad and I got to go change it. But if like a Nut and Fancy video came on, I would probably entertain it for a while. At least half of the video, so at least like 3 hours.
I only watch Brent. What is it? 0311 or 31?
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
actually the OG.
Yeah, that guy's
the OG.
as shit.
Yeah.
He's
Like-
the OG. And to this day, if anyone asks me like what YouTube page do you recommend, I almost always point to his. This dude is like the doctrinal like he's probably the best demonstration of any sort of like a basic military doctrine that anyone like would need. Like if you want to learn how to be a private, like that's the best page.
Dude, it's so cool too because he'll like put up whole videos on like how to initiate an ambush and that stuff that even pages like in our circle are like skittish about posting about. And he's like, yeah, so you set up your claymores here.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
me and Marshall were talking about going to one of his like 1-1 Shepherd things.
I've heard those are
And
great.
the only
Also-
thing that makes us hesitant about it is like it looks a little too milsim, where like they do colors in the morning,
Mhm.
and I'm not trying to stand at attention. Like-
I mean, the way I see it is like stuff like that. You're doing it for such a little amount of time, and like the rest of it is all like learning and training or whatever. So it's worth it.
yeah,
To be
That's
honest,
Like,
true,
okay,
dude,
that's
like,
true.
cool. I have to stand. I have to dress for like 10 minutes, and then that's
Yeah.
it. And then I have to do it again for 10 minutes when we're done.
the
And then
thing
like
with
that's
that
it.
is like, you know, so Brent is like a Marine Corps Sergeant Major. Like he is a career Marine guy. And so he's been in a long time and I'm sure that he probably had some sort of special duty assignment where he had to do like a bunch of that stuff, and he can see how like the I guess like the value of having that little bit of disciplinary initiation right in the morning is, you know.
yeah.
I don't know,
Just some
maybe
team
I'm
cohesion.
biased. Yeah, maybe I'm biased just cuz I'm a Marine too, so I got to stick up for my own, but
Well, you have to remember. So like one Shepherd, I did a little digging because Brent's great, but one of the unsung like YouTubers that Brent talks to all the time is Christopher Larson, and he's got some pretty good little talks on YouTube, and the dude has a really small page, but he's the owner of One Shepherd, and One Shepherd's cool. There's only a handful of organizations that do real legit force on force. You know, I'm always gonna sing praise on Darcy, but I mean, you know, One Shepherd, I think S&S training or something like that.
yeah.
Are like some of the only ones I know that do. And you know, the S&S and One Shepherd use miles, for example, which has its benefits, has its drawbacks. You know,
I'm taking cover behind this blade of grass.
yeah, I'm in this bush, which means I'm bulletproof.
Yeah. No, I think that like that's because that's the thing too, is like even for me and my guys, like we've been trying to figure out a better way to do force on force other than like taking the bolts out of our weapons for safety and just yelling bang at each other. Because the thing with that is like, okay, if you're going to practice ambushes and you have guys set up along whatever route is it for an ambush and like the other team is walking through, and their whole thing's to practice counter ambush. It's like the first time we did it, when everybody on the ambushing side jumped up and started yelling bang bang, like they just kind of stopped, and it's like, okay, well, like doesn't necessarily mean that your hit do reactions to contacts, and like they're doing it and like everybody's just invincible getting shot at. So it's like you got to find that balance of like, you know, like having basically like a guy acting as like a coyote or like a cadre, or like walking around being like, all right, well, you got up and to run to another position while they were on you know, firing on your position, so you're dead. Like do Casavax now, shit like that. So I think that is the benefit of blanks or miles, well, blanks. But.
So, Gio, I believe this is your kind of background, as you were like a professional Op 4 dude, and I think that's how you're like, if you're gonna run stuff with your team, I think you do have to have Op 4, and then the dude's actually getting the training.
So every organization that I've seen that does good force on force will have the same exact, you know, and one Shepherd has it. If you look at any of the videos that Brent puts up, the military does it in wide variety. And then like Darcy has the instructors on the catwalk, and then some of the students on the catwalk, and it all comes down to the same thing. You have to have some sort of observer controller style team, whatever force on force you're doing. It could be miles, it could be, you know, it could be sim rounds, it could be airsoft, you could even be yelling bang. You have to have some third party that has experience watching both sides, and you know, taking notes or like mentally, you know, remembering it, and then bringing that into the AAR, like, hey, this is what you did wrong, this is what you did right, this is what you could improve, this is what just happens. And every organization that I've seen or been a part of has had that. In the Army, you have dedicated, and it's always an NCO or an officer. They always have some degree of experience, and they're the observer controllers. They're the referees. They watch and they adjudicate. And for smaller lanes, so go and tell the Blue 4, like, hey, this is what you did wrong. They never tell the Op 4 anything. The Op 4, you know, we almost always started the engagements on our own accord, and we got so much reps that it really wasn't for us. But I mean, if you're smart as the Op 4, like you get something out of it. You'll learn something, and there's always something to learn once you start pitting two groups of people that have think and are allowed some freedom of movement and freedom of decision making.
Bringing it back to like groups that aren't so, you know, they don't have the personnel or the organization to like have a cadre or whatever. Like, you know, you just got to be accountable for yourself and take away the learning points. Like really observe what's going on and take away learning points that you can take away, and then not game it, you know. Like in Airsoft, me and Marshall went to, along with a couple of other members of PCG, went to Milsim West. It was fun, but there was a lot of gaming it, and you got to kind of discount what is being gamed as far as like engagement distances and like dudes not calling their hits and this and that, and then like really take away what is an actual learning point, which is like, hey, we set up this L-shaped ambush really well, and we got the drop on these guys. In real life, they'd be, you know, bloody messes on the ground. So, yes, if you can have a cadre, that's awesome, but like you just got to be accountable for yourself if you're going to do force on force as well.
I think between the four of us at MSW, so I just want to interject real quick that like we had brought maybe 3,500 rounds of blanks. Like we came loaded, each one of us, 10 to 14 mags and stuff. And we went through all of the ammunition during that course of that weekend. I mean, we were certainly always like trying to like engage with the enemy and stuff. And it ended up just being not a really good experience to like learn from. And there was like a couple things we took away, but ultimately I think, as far as training goes, I don't think Airsoft is it. That's kind of where I've like diverged away from a lot of like the guntubers and stuff. I think you at least got to have the real weapons, the real weight, and hear the real sounds or whatever. But yeah, being accountable, No one's getting
Yeah.
any training if everyone's
Well,
just trying to game it. Yeah.
the thing too, and so there's some, like, from what I've noticed, there's some nuances to running force on force, just off of what I've seen and how it's always been kind of played out. So you have to create an environment, depending on what your goals are, to like develop the group. You have to create an environment where the blue four have an avenue to win, but it's still like competitive. Like I've seen what bad, really easy force on force looks like, where like the op four just standing there and they just kind of die, and you're not getting any feedback from that. You're never going to get any feedback from an opponent that doesn't do anything. Or like, you know, so like you brought up Milsim West, for example, and like I know how it goes. Dudes are shooting blanks, and it's always been like an honor system with blanks because you don't have miles, you don't have a projectile, you don't have anything that kind of lets you know like, hey, you're hit. So yeah, it's an honor system, and I'm sure it's frustrating, like just kind of banging away against someone and no effect, and there's no one there to like, hey, you know, he's hit, he's dead. But well, what I was gonna get at is like, so like one thing I always notice is ratios. So like, you always kind of don't want the op four to be an overwhelming number. Even if they're better in skill, even if they know the area, whatever, you still don't want them to be like anywhere near an overwhelming number to the group that you're trying to run through the lane or run through the exercise. I've just noticed that just because chances are you never pick brand new guys that don't know what they're doing for the op four. Just by design, it always almost has to be like people with experience, just because you kind of have to leave them alone because you know, you only have so many instructors or cadre or whatever, and they can only be so many places at once. So you have to put trust in your, you know, your opposing force to kind of do what they're going to do. But so, you know, you kind of have these weird ratios where like it's a small group of op four versus like a much larger group of blue four. The op four are limited in some way, be it ammunition or, you know, their area of movement, and they have a different set of rules. And then the blue four, when they're going through, you know, depending on whatever you're testing, they go through that lane and they run against this opponent, and they still get feedback because it's the Goldilocks zone. It's too much freedom of movement, and the blue four get bodied in the assembly area, and they don't learn anything other than you need to pull security to your assembly area. But if you're trying to run an ambush lane, but so if you switch to the other sort of like spectrum, the other side of the spectrum where there's too much control, you know, you're not going to get any real feedback. You might as well have paper targets up there. So there's definitely some significant nuance, and there's a lot of commonalities that I've seen in successful organizations that run an opposing force. And almost always your opposing force has to have some degree of experience, and they have to have some degree of like self-sufficiency. And for whatever reason, that really does just kind of like engender creativity for those groups. So like for like anyone, you know, for y'all, I'm sure y'all figure that out real quick. Like, okay, cool, we're not getting anything out of this specific event. We're not getting any feedback. So I guess most of the lessons you guys did get is like, okay, it sucks to carry this gear, or it sucks, you know, I can move these pouches better, or like it'll be like personal stuff or like small internal group stuff, and not really anything tactical, I don't think, right?
Yeah, basically at Milsim West, like there were a couple problems with it, and if we could do it again, we would probably do things a lot different. They are very chain of command centric, and we came as PCG and wanted to run our group as PCG, but they wanted to run NATO. They wanted to run PCG within NATO. So like we were constantly getting dumbass orders from some 18-year-old kid who was like the pseudo LT, and like
very realistic.
It was honestly, it's the best milsim for anyone who's never been in the military. You should definitely go to a Milsim West event, because like there was a lot of sitting around in the rain waiting for LT's orders, like that
are always going to be dumb.
That are always going to be dumb. Changing LPOP positions and just nonsense.
Shifting 6
I want to
degrees
hit on
because
real
of
quick.
an endangered species in your AO.
What were you going to say, Marshall?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something real quick. Like, this is why anytime I've been asked, or like someone came to me and said, hey, you know, should I like get into airsoft for training? You know, it's like a good way to save on ammunition. You can kind of conduct it anywhere at any time. I've generally like steered them away. This is just me, in my personal opinion, is I think that once you start taking like this kind of training and this kind of mindset, especially for like the whole reasons why we train in the first place, you know, all of those points about the Second Amendment and tyranny and fighting tyranny and keeping our like loved ones safe and actually like protecting ourselves. I think that I don't want to conflate that at all with any game, you know, or any sort of like anything less than absolute like deadly seriousness. And so, in my opinion, I think that if you start training airsoft, in to replace like real life training with real life weapons, or like real life kind of OPFOR or tactical movements or whatever, that you end up starting to think, you know, everything is kind of this game-based system or whatever. And so I don't know. I just think that we need to diverge the community, and I think it's a little bit of a disservice to encourage airsofting as a replacement for like this deadly serious, you know, aspect of why we train in the first place.
There's a term that I've heard thrown around, and it's Miles confidence, and it's basically like, because you know that like what you're doing, there's no real inherent risk. You're playing. You're gonna treat it, yeah, like you said, like a game, and you're going to do things. You're going to be a lot bolder because you're like, okay, cool. I'm still going home at night, or I can just get it. You know, if I go and do this bold action, I'm tired. If I die and I take a bunch of them with me, I can, you know, I have a cool feed for my camera or whatever. But at the same time, like I can get a break too because I'm dead. Or yeah, I've heard stuff like that before because I used to airsoft when I was in like high school and stuff. I can see where it definitely you get those issues of gamification. And that was the fun thing about Darcy is the moment someone starts pulling out UTM rounds, they really fucking hurt. So all of a sudden you start being a little bit more cautious. You're like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to get shot, but I really don't want to get shot. And well, it's not obviously a perfect analog to an actual bullet. You know, it's definitely a lot closer. And you're also the other thing too is, and you know, before this turns into just me standing on a soapbox saying like, yeah, this is the best place ever. You're also surrounded by nothing but professionals. I mean, all the students that we were OPFORing against were all like, you know, this is their job to be a cop, to be SWAT, you know, whatever capacity that they're there. It's expensive, so you're serious. And all the OPFOR were serious too. They're all like repeat. They're all repeat OPFOR for the most part. And
yeah, they gunfight for a living.
Yeah, they either come from military backgrounds, or even if they don't, a lot of them are civilians, and they're serious, dude. You're talking about people that are spending as much money as you or I just to be OPFOR. Like they might not have their own groups, but they have similar beliefs, and they do all this. So everyone there is serious as fuck, and I think that's a big thing to kind of bring up, is like, you know, airsoft, because it's cheap, because it's accessible. It's very easy if it's not organized and coordinated the right way with OCs or whatever, or instructors or cadre, and then with the right people too. You really do stand at high risk of gamification, and then, you know, it just becomes shit flinging, and then no one learns anything. You have a fun day, sure, it's cool, it's fun, but once you come to the AAR board, it's like, well, what did you learn? And it's like, I don't know.
I learned how to have fun.
What you want to hear. Yeah, and we're not here to have fun.
I think, though, to rewind real quick, something to mitigate, well, something like with airsoft as a training tool, and like even UTMs to a degree, is like, it's kind of like dry fire, right? So UTM's not so much because there's felt recoil and stuff, but, you know, think of like that, there was that video that T-Rex Arms had posted, probably like a couple of years ago at this point, but it was that Japanese dude that only ever trained airsoft, and he came out to shoot real guns. And yeah, it took him a little bit to adjust because of the recoil and some other things, but it's the same way with like dry fire. Like airsoft is, the way that I look at it, it's just dry firing with. Don't tell Mike Glover this, but
don't talk about dry fire, brother. Don't talk about it.
It's like dry fire with better feedback. So, like, it's basically just a bunch of dudes running around dry firing at each other, and you know if their dry fire was aimed towards you, kind of thing. But you know, that's kind of the way that I think people should look at it, is that they should look at airsofting not as a primary training tool, but as another training tool to kind of supplement their training. So, like, you know, I can't go out with all my friends and load rounds in our rifles and say, all right, we all adjusted our zeros so that way we're going to be aiming high, or the barrel's going to be pointed high, so I'm going to shoot at you, but it's going to go over you. Like, trust me, like, you can't do that. So it's good to use airsoft because it's force on force, you know who gets hit, etc. But then, you know, with the miles confidence, like you had mentioned, I think that one thing that you can kind of do to help with that a little bit is to have some sort of I guess, for lack of better terms, like a painful punishment. So, like, yeah, every time you get hit, or every time that you do something to fuck everything up, you got to do like 40 burpees, for example.
Burpees, hell yeah.
I have an even more. I just came up with an even more probably relevant one. You have to now. Yeah. Whoa. Yeah, we
pause the podcast.
Yeah, we carve up a broomstick and sodomize you. No. What I was going to say is, like, if you're going to do a force on force event with airsoft and you're worried about it not getting serious, all you have to do is, when you get hit, actually force your group to treat you like a casualty.
Oh yeah.
You want to inflict pain? Guess what, homie? You're about to carry the stretcher all the way back to the assembly area.
Yeah,
and it's not going to be fun.
That's something that I don't see a lot of people doing. I mean, granted, too, like, most of what I see other people doing, it's either in us conversing about it privately, or it's like people posting stuff. But for the most part, people are talking about, like, the theory of extraction casualties, and like, oh, once you come upon a casualty, this is how you do, like, the TCCC type deal. And it's always from, like, the super medical pages. But you never really see guys, like, you know, actually carrying casualties out. So that's, like, kind of one thing that we're going to start doing a lot more, is implementing casualties. Like, you know, halfway through, just, okay, you're down, or I'm hit. Like, this is my casualty. You have to do like a basic level treatment, so that way it tests to make sure that, like, your IFAC is accessible. Everybody knows where it's at. It's not fucked up. If you have tourniquets on you, like, they're accessible, all that. So say that you're like, okay, so-and-so, you're down, gunshot wound to the left leg, and everybody has to post security. You have the dedicated medical guy treat him, throw him on the stretcher, and then you guys have to take turns carrying him out and then planning an extraction, working with QRF if you have the manpower to do all that stuff. Or worst case, you carry them for a couple 100 meters through the woods, and then, you know, you continue on normally, like he's not a casualty anymore. But stuff like that will really, really start bringing the fucking hurt.
I will say that the one place that Airsoft shines is CQB. When Marshall was talking about milsim West, the really big problem with milsim West as far as a training aspect, now I'm not taking away anything for the weekend warrior that wants to go out and have a good time and, like, hang out with his bros and shoot plastic at other dudes. Like, that's all cool and stuff, but the engagements just weren't at all realistic. You could see them from 100 meters out, but you could only engage from like 50 meters because Airsoft just doesn't have the range. With CQB, Airsoft is, I hate to use the word more realistic, but that's really
more
what
authentic.
It is, where more authentic, right? And you can manipulate your weapon in and around structures, which is a training point in it of itself. And you can use cover, you can enter rooms. Now, again, you have to be accountable for taking the training seriously and not gaming it. You can't just take 1 million rounds and then go down, or hide behind a door, a door frame and think you're behind cover, because you're not in real life. Like, 5.56 is just going to go right through a door frame and into your center mass and you're going to be a bloody mess on the floor. But take training where you can get it, and then realize where you're not getting training, where you're not going to be able to replicate realistic situations and scenarios.
I think that one thing too, to kind of piggyback off that, is that like utilizing airsoft within your group would be really good. But I think that one of like some of the problems with people that go to the different, I guess like less serious airsoft fields, so not like a milsim West, is that like you're going to be playing with kids that live local, and you can have all the gear and all the realistic training that you're trying to obtain, but you're still going to be doing just as much damage as the kid that's running around in like a hoodie and giant goggles with a pistol. You know what I mean? Like there's not that sort of thing where it's like, okay, well, you know, I'm not going to pick a handgun as my primary for XYZ reason. It's like, well, it all shoots the same. So I think that using it within your group and being able to run a drill, like a force on force scenario, stop, break it down, do an AAR, all the guys that fucked up and did something wrong have to run or do some sort of PT or something like that to you know, help with you taking it more seriously. Like, oh, I don't want to get hit because I really don't feel like fucking running with all this shit on, you know? So
just the competitive environment within your team, like I've found a lot of times, is enough. I did a lot of training with Core Vision training out here in Bremerton, Washington, and they do a great job of like cultivating that competitive nature. They've got a shoot house in their facility, and it's all one. They have the cadre to actually like play that, you know, Overwatch element to say like, hey, you fucked this up. Oh, you think you really did good, but no, you didn't use cover correctly, or you could have done this better. And then two, it's meant for the serious guy who actually wants to learn how to operate in and around structures, not the airsofter. And we had a couple airsofters come to some of their events, and they got shut down really quick because Kyle and TJ and the rest of the cadre over there are extremely serious about real training and not gaming airsoft as a training opportunity, and actually using it as just that, a training opportunity.
yeah, I mean, it's like anything else though. Even if you get all your guys and you go out to the field or whatever, if you're going on public land and you're trying to practice whatever, even if in the back of a handful of guys' heads, it's like, oh, well, this isn't real. It doesn't matter. And they like start slipping up on the disciplinary things or the things that you're trying to train. And, you know, they're getting lazy on their patrolling techniques and etiquette and, you know, just stuff like that. It's like, or if they're just kind of starting to fuck off because they just want to come out and have fun. Like, yeah, you should allot in your timeline for you to have fun. If there is, you know, guys traveling a long distance and stuff, and they're taking time away from their family, and they're coming out between, you know, on the weekend when they're going to go, they go from work to living out in the woods back to work kind of thing. You should allot in your timeline for there to be a little bit of fuck around time, just as a relief and build that camaraderie and stuff. But, you know, as soon as you get in that mindset of like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's not real, we're leaving, you know, Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon or whatever, you're going to start slipping up on a lot of the training things. Like when you go out there, you should have the mindset of like, there's a real threat out here. And, you know, there's one thing that I found that can kind of be used for that is if you go in a completely different area than what you're used to. So we did one trip where we drove down south and we went into a national forest and we were out there. And we know that in that area, in the Appalachian Mountains, that it was kind of, there's like a bit of like moonshiners and meth makers and stuff like that. And so it was kind of in the back of our head, like, well, we don't know this area. We don't know what area is safe. We've never been here before. We know that these guys are out here. You know, at any minute we could be walking, you know, hit a tripwire on like a noisemaker to alert some dudes like making meth in a cabin or something. You know what I mean? So like that kind of thing in the back of your head made you a little bit more cautious. At the end of the day too, you don't know how people are going to react if they stumble upon you, and 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever other dudes in full kit and everything like that. Plus you're out of state, so it's like you kind of start to fuck with the psychological training aspect.
I think that's something that's missed a lot with dudes and their training they do with their group is just there's no risk involved. Like we did a trip about a month ago now where we went to this old abandoned mine, and it wasn't so much, we weren't training any ambushes or any like TTPs or anything. We just went with our rucks and gear and basically went camping to go check out this mine. But like there were some hellacious river crossings. We were bushwhacking the whole way. It wasn't very much an established path, so we had to use GPS the whole time, as well as route planning before that. And then the last little bit of the climb to the mine was all shale and stuff. And there was one point where I was scared to death that I was going to fall down this mountain. But I'm not saying just throw caution to the wind and like send it, but you have to have a little bit of risk involved in your training just to keep things lively and keep dudes on their toes. This isn't, Wally World where all this rides are safe. Like we're training for the real world here.
Yeah, that's a big thing too, is just, remembering what the purpose of your training is. What is the ultimate goal of us doing what we do, right? It's to train for those dangerous scenarios where you don't want to go into a room because you don't know what's on the other end, or you might know that there's people out there that have full intentions on killing you, and you're like, well, I still got to go in here. And that's kind of the thing too, is that a lot of guys in general, I think, are very relaxed when it comes to the training mindset, and even just between training, like there's things that you can do in the meantime to kind of keep your brain sharp. So like one thing that I've done a couple times in the Telegram channel is post like tactical decision games. Like, hey, here's the scenario. This is what you need to accomplish. This is what tools you have. And this is kind of the surrounding like circumstances. How do you do it? And there's a lot of people that have, good real world experience that come in and they're like, well, I do this and this and this. And they lay out a whole plan of what they're going to do, and it's good. And, some other guy with a whole bunch of other real world experience in a different aspect has a slightly different plan, and you gain value from it. But then you get so many people that are like, oh, well, why would I do it at that time? Why would I do this? I wouldn't do that in the first place. And it's like, well, you're missing the point. Like it's supposed to train your brain to come up with these scenarios that are less than ideal. So that way, if in the future you have to do it, then it's not really a big deal kind of thing. So, I mean, you can even see the relaxation in people from that aspect on something that's as effortless as, sitting on your couch in your underwear with your phone, like just typing up what you would do in some theoretical situation. Like you don't even need to get up and move to do it,
So at my job, we do tabletop exercises. We have there's like a diorama or a map, an overhead map of the plant, and one person runs the op4, and then the rest of the group there of students are, trying to defend the place. And it's pretty simple. It's done with a map, and the only prerequisites are like every quote unquote move is done in a certain time interval. And so you basically go through all of your actions for all of your players. Like it can be done between two people, or it can be, everyone kind of works as a group versus like the op4. And basically, like it's like almost like a tabletop game.
It's like BPRE.
Yeah, basically. But it works really well because even just as a training tool, some people kind of get the idea, the big picture more like that. And it's good for training new guys, like, hey, what's everyone doing? And I'm wondering if that's something that you could kind of scale to this. I know that Redbeard does it pretty well with his Instagram stories. Like
it's amazing what he does with just Instagram.
Well, it's not just him, but like even then, like he's probably one of the biggest heavy hitters, which is funny because if you look at history, I think Reaper and I have talked about this. if you look at history, you know, things get really funky when you have Germans training Americans.
Hey, yo, we don't want to go there. Come on now.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things where like the I don't know. I don't want to like keep on beating the same point, but like there's a certain thing where you're handed a situation and you have to navigate it. Like you know, it's kind of that idea like you're put in a box and you got to find your way out. Like, yeah, obviously the optimal situation is that you would never in that box in the first place, but the reality of it is, or you know, in this sort of scenario, you're in this box, figure it out. Like there's no secret cheat code to get out of it. There's no secret like, you know, oh, well, I'm just going to use underground tunnels. Like, okay, those don't exist. Like, you can't just do that. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many people that'll try to find the weird workarounds so that way they don't need to put in the effort of just thinking about how they would navigate a less than ideal situation. And I can definitely tell that those guys are the same ones that go out to their, like, training, and it's them, you know, 30 feet from their car sitting around a fire the whole time. And then occasionally they'll go out and shoot something and come back and, you know, it's not like anything of substance.
Yeah,
but
that was the whole event.
Yeah, right.
Shoot at trash.
That's
drink beer.
The best event. I mean, you got to train how you fight, and I'm going to be drinking the whole time. So, yeah. But anyway, so like for you guys, because like one of the big things that also I think that a lot of people kind of forget, or like conversely they'll use it as sort of a coping mechanism, is that, you know, different areas are going to have different sort of SOPs and TTPs and things that you guys do and methods of training and all that stuff. So I've never even been to the Pacific Northwest. I went to mountain warfare training a couple months ago, but like for being in the Pacific Northwest, what do you guys see as you know, the main things that you focus on for training and the main things that you get value out of?
Marshall, you want to take this?
Yeah, definitely. The Pacific Northwest is like a really, really interesting like geographical area. Not only can you have like ocean, you can have, you know, 6,000, 7,000 foot peaks all within like an hour and a half or 2 hours of itself. And so you really get this like interesting area to play with. It's a beautiful landscape. And so, but with that comes like a lot of like, yeah, and an actual like rainforest on the Olympic Peninsula. And so you get all these different like places to train and like all different types of weather pattern, because if there's something like, especially for the Pac Northwest, like weather changes often and it changes like with altitude. So you can start your gathering area could be, you know, partly sunny and 70, and by the time you hit your target, wherever it may be up in the mountains, it could be raining and 55 degrees and misty with like horrible sight lines. And so you're having to really consider like all the stuff you're bringing and like all the weight that you're going to carry with yourself, because it's going to be a climb to glory. There are no flat trails anywhere in the Pacific Northwest. You will be climbing 30 to 45 degree grades. The trail may be lost. It may be overgrown. You have to bring a machete. I mean, it's truly kind of a hellacious, like a green hell in its own respect, at altitude, you know? And so kind of in our scope of training, we've been able to like play with some different systems that like, other teams around the nation may not be like considering. And so, for example, just recently I've been thinking to myself, like, you know, these hellacious hell climbs, right, to wherever it may be on this peak. You know, I'm carrying like all this food and water with me. And so I think to myself, well, how can I make my movement more efficient, right? Because everywhere you go, you're being impeded by other things. Bramble is, you know, hanging on your gear, all the weight on your body, you know, things are shifting around on you, right? It's already, your movement is already impeded. So like food and water is something that's going to be like the heaviest thing you carry. And so I'm like, well, how can I make my movement more efficient? So what I've been doing is going through like the food I bring, and I've been putting food on a scale of like efficiency. because the thing you need in like these environments is calories, straight up, just calories.
That's why I only
Doesn't matter
pack
how
bars
you
with
get 'em.
peanut butter for food.
I mean, actually, that's a good one. You know, it's like you just need calories. You're going to be burning calories. Doesn't matter what it is, right? If you're going to be going up and putting on combat gear and putting yourself through the mountains for any like substantial amount of distance or time, you're just going to be burning, you know, twice the amount of calories you would be. And so, if I bring like a 0 calorie bang or something because I think it tastes good, well, that's just straight up dead weight. That's just straight dead weight. Right, because it has no calories for energy. It's maybe a stimulant, like because it has all those like you know, things that keep you alert and awake. But could I get those in a lighter weight package that would make then my food and water more efficient?
Yeah, like tablets
what
for
foods
a
are
water
you
bottle
bringing?
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you're bringing low calorie snacks or something that, you know, like fruits and vegetables are great, sure, but they're kind of low calorie and they're kind of heavy and bulky. So you got to start considering like your food and water. And so we just had this conversation this last weekend where we had a discussion about water management. And so I've been shifting a little bit away from the whole mentality of, well, you got to have all the water on your body at all times, like a camel, right? And carry it from start to finish, no matter what. Because I think then it's a mission planning failure by not allowing stops along the way to your target to get water, right? If I'm going to be moving 15 miles in the mountains up 3K, 4K elevation, and I'm crossing 6 streams and a river, then why do I need to start with 6 liters of water on my back? You know, if it's going to be weight, that's going to impede my movement. And so these are some of the things like in the Pac Northwest that other teams around the nation where things are a little bit more flat or a little bit more free to like walk through, not be considering.
Yeah, like for
and
oh, go ahead.
but well, with the water thing, it's such a balancing act, right? Because like
Balancing act. Mm-hmm.
it's really between two two considerations. It's Marshall's right, like getting through all this bramble with a 40 to 60 pound pack is like, I know dudes in Afghanistan that were, you know, 100-pound combat loads, and that's great and all. And they, don't get me wrong, they put in work, but like traveling through bramble and stuff with a 100-pound combat load is, I don't want to say it's impossible, but in the Pac Northwest, it's going to be near impossible. So the less weight you want to have on your back, the better. But you also have to consider, what if you are not able to access that water source for X, like you see it on the map and, you know, you're like, okay, we plan to refill water at this water source. But what if you're just not able to access it due to X consideration or X situation? Whether it be like just making something up, you know, like a grizzly bear is at your water source and there's no way to circumvent him to get to the water source. Or in made up universe, the water source is contested by a bunch of crackheads that you don't want to fuck with. So it's really a balancing act of like, how much water do you want to carry versus like how do you want to route plan to refill water, and what if that water is contested in some sort of way?
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've always been very lucky with, and that I started doing really early on, like when I would just go on backpacking trips and stuff, is that, you know, I'm in the Great Lakes region, and it's pretty, I mean, I had mentioned this to you earlier, Cameron, but you're always within 6 miles of a body of water. So for your route planning, at some point you can have like a body of water to hit, like, you know, halfway through, if you're hiking a loop, you know, have this body of water toward the turnaround point of the loop or whatever the case is, or like the halfway point. So that way you don't need to carry all your water. Like my standard water loadout for the longest time has been either 3 Nalgene's or 3 Nalgene's and a Camelback. And that's all I'll take for however long. Or there's certain times where I've been on, hiking, like solely hiking trips. And it's been along one of the Great Lakes. So it's like, the most that we're ever going to have without direct access to water is, a handful of miles. And even then there's like tributaries and stuff that run off of it. So that's always been a great thing. And then also like one consideration for my area is that the weather is generally pretty, like predictable. Like Marshall was saying that once you get up in the mountains, I mean, the mountains have their own sort of weather patterns and they're in and of themselves. Like I remember I went to a mountain comm course years ago, and it was in the winter, but there was no like snow or anything. It was in January, and the instructors were like, "Oh yeah, there's gonna be a blizzard," and everybody's like, "No, there's not. The weather's gonna be clear. There's no clouds or anything." And they're like, "Oh no, whenever these winds blow from this region, like we know that it's gonna be there." And the Weather Channel said that there wasn't gonna be anything. Everybody, like, the way that you normally plan for weather was saying that it'll be fine. And the next morning we woke up and there was like 6 inches of snow. So, the people that live in these regions are going to learn those cues. But even when I went to mountain warfare, like, almost 7, 8 years ago, there was one day where we went up in the mountains for like these training lanes, and we started out, it was hot because we went there in August. And we get up to the top of the mountain, and then we sit down and we're getting like our first class, and it starts to get kind of cold out. So everybody kind of puts on a warming layer, and then it starts raining, and then it gets hot again, and then it snows, and then it starts raining again, and then it gets hot again, and then it rains again. Like it goes back and forth. So, like you were saying, your packing considerations, just being in a mountainous environment alone means that you have to pack more, which then in turn means that you burn more calories, especially because, your movement methods of traversing, or, fuck it, Leroy Jenkins this mountain and just go straight up. That's going to like you're going to have to
no switchbacks.
Yeah, exactly. Like traversing is for the weak. I'm going straight line. Be a fucking man about it. My pace count's going to be awesome. No, but like the thing with that is it kind of creates like a paradox in some ways. Like, okay, I need to pack more because I'm going to be eating a lot, but then because I'm packing more, I'm carrying more weight, so I'm burning more calories, so then I need to eat more. So it's like a constant like thing of like, okay, at a certain point I just need to realize that I don't need to eat anymore, and I'll make it out alive.
That's another thing. You brought up pace count, and operating in the PNW, there is no...
Just forget it.
Just forget it. Don't bring your pace count beads. Don't bring your ranger beads.
If somebody has ranger beads, they have other intentions with them.
You're going to wake up with a surprise in your butt at night.
Don't go in that guy's tent when you go to wake him up for a watch. Just kind of shake it from the outside.
It's all terrain association in the PNW. It's like, hey, there's that peak. That means we're here. Let's start moving.
And
handrailing and backstopping.
Yeah, that's completely different too from where I'm at. Like, it's so fucking flat here that the terrain association is like, hey, I think I'm at this intersection that appears on the map because we passed this lake like an hour ago, and this is kind of roughly our pace. And you're like, kind of piece it together. And if you're not using a GPS to pull your actual like no shit 10-digit grid, you're just, I mean, you're guessing, unless you come to like a large body of water, some really prominent feature, like the one hill that's in your area that's pretty big. But like looking at the topo lines and seeing that there's a cliff, that's within this short mountain range and all this shit, like, no, you're not doing that. Actually, like doing the land nav portion in Bridgeport was so much easier than doing it out in my woods, because in my woods it's like, okay, I can't see this tree on the map, so I don't know where the fuck I'm at.
Every tree looks the same and it's all flat, so you're going to be guessing and checking a lot more, shooting your azimuth a lot more.
Sounds like South Florida.
Well, that was kind of the joke too, is like when if you guys are familiar with Wandering Hoosier, he's the guy that comes out with us pretty regularly, and he's like the map guy, right? So like usually when we start planning the trip and and if we're gonna do it in my area, because we kind of trade off between a couple different areas, just depending on like who, just because like guys drive kind of far for it, so we want to make it fair, I guess. I'll pick the AO, and then he's immediately like, okay, what are my limits? Where do you want the map of? Like all this stuff. So he always like makes all the maps, and then gets them laminated and hands them out to kind of like key personnel and stuff. It's pretty convenient. But you know, one thing that he was we did like a land nav training thing a couple months ago, where we had we basically would break up like fire teams, because we had 2 fire teams in myself. So you know, one of the fire teams would be given a point, and they were given either like direction distance. I can't remember exactly how we did it, but like I gave them my grid, and then I gave them, yeah, that's what we did. We gave them the grid of the base camp, and they just had to write it down. I gave them direction distance to their point that I had picked out on the map randomly without them seeing. So it was usually like an intersection or like a key terrain feature. Obviously like a key terrain feature out here isn't going to be like a mountain peak. It's going to be, you know, an intersection or body of water or something. And I give them direction distance, so the way they had to plot it, plot the grid point, find the direction distance, you know, factor in the GM angle and everything from magnetic to grid or vice versa, plot it, figure out, do their, you know, find their azimuth, find their distance, figure out their pace count, all that shit, and then go about it. And so on one of the fire teams, Hoosier was on there, and when they came back, they were like, oh yeah, this is it. And he was kind of laughing. He's like, dude, terrain like recognition is out here is impossible. He's like, everything just looks the same. I'm like, yeah, that's it does. It's terrible. Like if you're lost, you're fucking lost. There's no getting out of that.
Right.
Yeah, better pull out the GPS and just, you know, cheat a little.
Yeah.
So interestingly, like on go ahead.
No, you got it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like on GPS signal, you know, with those peaks and valleys, I mean, they're so steep, and you have such a low hanging like cloud coverage with rain that here, unless you have a GPS dedicated specifically for like hard to reach signal areas, for example, I carry like a Garmin 66 SR. It's like a specific model. They only made it for a year. I don't know why they discontinued it. But it picks up like more satellites than a standard like Garmin, and therefore it has like a higher chance of like getting your position. And so I know that when I tried using like lesser units in the Pacific Northwest, that you just wouldn't get a location for a long time. You could be sitting there for 10 minutes plus waiting for it to pick up your location, and you wouldn't get anything based on like the rain or cloud coverage. And so eventually I got a digital unit that would be able to pick up a signal in our area, you know, that's specifically designed to help like get a signal through clouds, you know, in canyons with heavy tree cover, right? Very much so what we operate in. And but for a long time, it was just terrain association. You don't even need to shoot an azimuth in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, if the river's on your left and you got to go that way, okay, then as long as the river's on my left, I walk that way. It's not, you can't even shoot at azimuth because the bushes between you and 100 yards, you know, you're going to be taking a machete through anyway. So you can't see shit. You can't even pick up an azimuth off of nothing. So yeah, just interesting things about the kind of the mountain terrain.
Yeah.
So
there's
Tyler,
considerations. Yeah, go ahead.
we got to talk about something that has been a controversy between you and PCG.
All right.
What the fuck is your problem with Woodland?
See, I was gonna actually
Leave Woodland alone.
So I don't know. I started it because I knew it would piss people off. Like the thing, like, I don't know. I'm bad with it sometimes. Like I will just change patterns for no fucking reason. Like, hey, this works fine, but I like the way this looks, and then that's it. And like it kind of became a point of contention. Not really. It kind of became like a joke for a little bit within just my group of guys that we'd always going to change. But no, I don't know. I don't think that Woodland performs as well as other patterns under the IR spectrum. Like when you look at that under night vision compared to like AOR2 or Tropic or something else. And then I think too that the problem with M81 honestly is like the general demographic that uses it doesn't look professional or like good. Like it's always the dudes that buy like the surplus clothes that are like 3 sizes too big or something they got out of their dad's closet from the Cold War, or like obese people that are in their little like militias. But I don't know. It was mostly just to piss people off.
Yeah.
Well, it pissed us off.
Yeah, it
No,
looks
I'm
like it was
just kidding.
effective. Yeah, certainly like a camouflage that's like got a more specific, like targeted region in mind. Definitely dark and wet. Which is the Pacific Northwest is basically raining 9 months out of the year. You can just guarantee that when you go training, it will be raining and it will be gray, and it just kind of blends in really well with the moss and rock there, And multicam we had just found was too light in this area, but multicam is a better universal camouflage pattern for the majority of like the nation's deciduous forests and things, or maybe if I could blanket statement that, but
Yeah,
between the two at least.
So, because I had made that meme like not too long ago, that was it basically like pitted the multicam versus M81 thing, but it was mostly just like a jab at the guys that say that they will refuse to use multicam because that's what federal agents in the military and police and stuff use, and then they'll use M81, which all of those same entities used 10, 15, 20 years ago. So I don't know, it's just
At Waco.
yeah, exactly.
Literally at Waco. And the guys will be like, oh yeah, that was terrible. Like, I hate the people that did it. And they're like wearing the same exact thing that they did. Plus the other thing too is I think that like a lot of people pick these. I think that like they think that they're unique in a way.
Fashion show.
I think that they're unique in a way, or they think that they're unique in a way because they're picking something that quote unquote nobody else is using, and then they make it their whole personality. So they get like extra upset when you're like, "Nah, that shit's stupid."
What are you saying? Like,
What do you
just
mean
go
by-
ahead and say it.
Well, what do you mean by Sirtarn's lame?
I don't even know what I'm saying. No, I don't know. It's just like the thing that I've and even I've kind of, I don't know, skirted this line a bit is like you want something that's a little unique. So you're like, oh, like this seems cool and effective, and it might be effective, but like there's so many other things to consider with like camouflage selection. And part of that too, I think that is often overlooked is like how professional does it look, especially for groups that are becoming more prominent. Like if you're familiar with like the Appalachian Ranger guys, they do a lot of like community stuff, for example. So like those guys going out in their community wearing something that looks very unprofessional isn't going to be as good for their image. And then, because at the end of the day, like for you guys, if you picked M81 or AOR2 or Multicam Tropic or whatever the case is, any like dedicated woodland pattern, it's probably going to work good enough. At the end of the day, it's I think a lot of people pick a pattern to sort of, I guess, classify their identity. There's probably like a less retarded way to say that, but like they want that, and then also just the fact of like, I think a lot of people too just pick stuff because it's cheap. At the end of the day, like, okay, I got this for either for free or I got it for $20 at a surplus store.
You could just do
Well,
it.
it's hard to
not wear camo.
I see you.
Honestly. So PCG, we definitely fuck with heavy with woodland, and like Marshall said, it is a really effective camo pattern in our specific AOR, but we're definitely not married to woodland at all. We've been known to run tiger stripe, and actually at my current job as of right now, not so in about a week, I wear AOR2 every day. So I picked up a bunch of surplus AOR2 from the exchange, and I'm going to be issuing it out to all the boys here soon. And we're going to be trying out that pattern here. So, like, we're not married to any one pattern. Also, I would argue that if you're trying to look professional, any sort of camo is probably not the way to go, because the most professional one is multicam, in my opinion, and then you just look like some sort of government agency, and that gets into a whole nother realm of things, but I would just go polo and khakis with plate carrier on. You know, like if you're gonna go
You got to do the khaki pants and the black polo, like
exactly,
2000,
yeah,
2006
The-
Blackwater.
Yeah.
yeah, some Magpul Dynamics looking dudes out there.
Yeah, you got to flip your mags when you drop them on your rifle, too. That was the golden era, man. Like that whole thing with like early Travis Haley, Chris Costa with the Magpul Dynamics.
Dude, that's what got
videos.
me into all this.
I remember
Oakley gas
watching
cans,
those.
sunglasses.
I remember watching it like you could only watch clips of it on YouTube at the time when YouTube still only had like a 10-minute limit for videos, but you'd only be able to watch like clips of it because it was copyrighted and all that stuff. And I'd watch like the same clips and I'd be like, man, that stuff is so cool. That was like,
Dude,
like the progression
watched the
from nothing
bloopers.
fancy as a kid to the
Yeah,
bloopers
yeah.
too.
The bloopers were fantastic. Like when I think it was Travis was just chatting to Costa about getting Frosties at Wendy's, and they were like
Yeah.
arguing about like if it was a Frosty or like a milkshake or something, and like that shit had me dying, bro.
Yeah.
This is a golden age.
Yeah. It's funny, like kind of. I know that I didn't really want to dwell on it, but going back to like the camouflage thing, like my guys have switched stuff around mostly because like in the beginning when it was only a few of us, and everybody kind of had a say, it was always like that opinion of like, oh, well, I like the way this looks better than this. So actually in the beginning we did run M81, and I think it was mostly because like some of the guys early on were not as like well off, I guess, so they wanted something that they could get for cheap or something that they already had. But we actually did like some testing where we took all of the patterns that I had in like this bin. I had like this like a target bin that was filled with all these patterns, and I had like you know M81 and AR2 and Flectarn and all this shit. And we put it all at night on the side of like this little hill, and it's all like really close range. And then the one guy that had the nods at the time, the only one that had the nods at the time, came out and he was looking at them and he would just point, okay, I see this one, I see this one, I see this one. He didn't see us lay it down. And then the pattern that we actually almost lost was AOR2 on the ground, and it was like so good. And then we were all like, all right, well, it's settled. Like that's, you know, it works great during the daytime, it works great at night, all that. And then, you know, there are some opinions of some of the guys that they didn't like it at XYZ. It was expensive, whatever. So then we ended up going with a couple different things. We did like Tropic for a little bit, but then it was like kind of hard to find for the guys that couldn't afford like the really good cuts at the time. So then eventually we ended up just kind of forcing like, all right, we're just going to go AR2 because you can go on eBay and you can pick up cry shit for, you know, $150 or whatever. And
Well, not only
works.
that, and the Navy working uniform is pretty much a solid field uniform right off the bat. Like it's quote unquote raid modded. It's got patches, fields on the shoulders. It has, you know, the button up fly instead of the zipper fly. So it's a good to go field uniform pretty much right off the bat, even though it's used by a bunch of dudes who just sit at desks and like chip paint all day. So whatever.
And like women that make TikToks.
And like dudes, wait, what? Huh?
But yeah, that's the other thing too, is that with AOR2, because it was a surplus pattern, we ended up deciding that would be a better option because, you know, it's always going to be in existence, at least for the foreseeable future. And you can get anything from a $40 set of NW3s all the way up to a set of Cry or Patagonia or whatever. So you have a good range of like, you know, somebody comes in and they don't have the budget of somebody else, they can still kind of get something. Whereas at the time with Tropic, it was like, okay, you get Cry's true spec or like occasional like triple out design drops or something like that. So the only thing is like finding gear in it. Like the only gear that you can get is like 2011 Eagle Industries stuff.
Solid color gear. Solid color gear all the way.
Yep.
Or multicam even works
say.
really well. Like multicam gear is a really solid option, especially for like for us. We switch patterns because like any woodland pattern that we have is going to be way too dark in the winter time. in the fall time, just because everything goes very brown here. And then when you get snow, obviously, you know, you can use overwhites or whatever, but like we just use desert patterns during that time. So it also made sense because we were already running AOR1 for the winter time. So it's like, just keep it in the same family, AOR2, AOR1. Plus then, like, if you mix and match stuff, it doesn't look as weird, which, you know, that can come down to personal preference. I don't know the effectiveness of that, but fuck it.
I say solid.
What?
Go ahead.
I just always tell people to get multicam gear because there's a ton of army surplus for it too. So if you're ever like, oh shit, like I need pouches, you know, Eagle Industries, you know, Tactical Tailor, you know, all these companies are going to cater to it just because the Army's the biggest branch.
Oh yeah. Plus, anytime that you look for gear in general, it's like Black Coyote, Ranger Green, Multicam. Those are pretty much the solid, like, or the you know, reliable colors you can get. Once you start trying to fashion in, like, you know, I want all my gear to match my uniform of Tropic or Arid or AOR, whatever the fuck, or M81 even, it's like you're looking for very cherry-picked items that are hard to get, and like a lot of the companies don't stock it regularly. So then it's like, oh, I need this thing because of, you know, whatever, and you go online to try to get it in whatever like special pattern you're running all your gear in. You're like, oh, that one's out of stock, and it was only in stock for 2 weeks 6 months ago, you know. So
my argument for solid color gear is just you know, it can transverse between civies, it can go on AOR2, it can go on woodland, and you know, when you put on that polo and khakis, it can still look semi-professional. I think a majority of us run Ranger Green, not because it's like the best color in the world, but it just looks good with all the different patterns, and, you know, a pair of civies or whatever you want to, you know, naked too, if that's your thing.
yeah, it's something that I had posted with that meme, just completely destroying all the M81 users, was like a couple of charts from Hyper Stealth, from the U.S. Army, like camouflage improvement thing or whatever they called, experiment. I can't remember like the actual title of it, but basically when the Army adopted multicam, and they did testing of all the different uniforms and stuff like that, pretty extensive testing, because they had felt the you know, the weight of picking UCP as a uniform for so long, and however many people died because of it. But anyway, so they were going through, and there's charts of it that you can see too, of like, it'll show multicam with you know, matching PPE, Coyote, Ranger Green, etc., and it shows how it does in different environments. And if I recall, I believe that hold on, actually I'm gonna look it up because I don't want to say something incorrect, even though this whole time I've ever done a podcast, all I've said is incorrect stuff. So 1 second.
UCP, dot UCP is kind of a flex. Like if I saw a whole team of dudes running that, I don't know, I would have conflicted feelings because
I would just think they're poor.
but at least they took the time to dye it, you know.
Dude, I hate dyed UCP so fucking much. I am like anybody that's like, oh, I dyed my UCP, like I will ban them from chats. I don't give a fuck.
So what's the worst camouflage pattern? What's like the most cringe worst camouflage? Is it
dyed UCP?
Dyed UCP?
100%.
Over multicam black? Over multicam black?
I'm literally wearing multicam black pants right now. I did yard work in them.
Bro, that's all they're good
The
for.
most dangerous,
yard work.
the most dangerous podcast today.
I found that
Conflict.
so I have like
Controversy sells.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't care about that, but like, I don't know. I found that like if I'm just doing stuff around the house, that just wearing like BDUs and combat pants and stuff is so much more comfortable than wearing like jeans. So I just started doing it recently, and I'm not autistic enough to go out in public like wearing that.
You wear pants? You wear pants around your house? That's fucking weird, bro.
Yeah, I don't know when the time's gonna come for me to get a knock on my door, so I always want to look my best for my mugshot.
Me rocking an undersized Winnie the Pooh shirt
with your gut hanging out.
And multicam black ties.
Yeah, so I keep trying to find this fucking chart, but basically, yeah, dude, it doesn't. Guy Kramer took it down because he knew I was going to ask about it. He has that like
Kramer's a terrorist.
Oh, here it is. Okay, multicam with different PPE scores in 4 different environments. So in cropland, woodland, yeah, so in all instances, multicam with matching PPE did the best. And in woodland, ranger green PPE on multicam did like just shy of it, and then like coyote and then khaki. But like when you go into a mountainous region, then actually mountainous to ranger green is working better. Yeah, I don't know. I can post it, but the only place where it didn't fucking work well is sandy desert. Like, okay, obviously, but yeah. I remember that like I'd posted the charts like with the meme, and it was just showing like multicam effectiveness in different areas than M81. And then dude, I got so many messages from people saying, or like comments on it saying how they don't use multicam and they think it sucks and stuff. And I'm like, I don't really use multicam that much either. Like I have a set and I have stuff in it, but like I just did it because I knew that that's like the anti M81. Like that's the thing that people hate, that are like the M81 enthusiasts are like, I need to do this to take a stand against multicam.
Well, when I did my little posts on like, hey, Confucius Origins, like we run M81 and it works pretty
Confucius?
good. Confusion Origins.
Confucius said, yeah, every time, instead of me posting, you just got to open a fortune cookie to understand what I'm going to say. I am Confucius Origins.
Confusion Origins.
The Chinese knockoff.
Yeah, I'm the TMC version of like who were we memeing about? Oh yeah, Randy Weaver. I'm the TMC Randy Weaver. Oh fuck, that was so funny.
Yeah, so I would post that, and then I would get dudes that would like message me, like DM me, and they'd be like, "Yeah, that guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. I mean, he wants the shit, and he's a bitch." What the fuck? I was like, "Hey, man, it's not that serious." Like,
we should have just came up with like a fake feud where we just like attack each other all the time over something that's so. I mean, we can still do it, but over something that's like so pointless and so stupid.
No, but it's pointless to have a feud now that we've announced it.
No.
It's only funny if it's not real.
People won't know what it is. People won't. We'll DM each other.
Yeah,
we'll slide into each other's DMs and we'll concoct.
It's one of those things where like. It's going to happen at some point. You just don't know when. So like,
yeah,
we're going to do a bunch of decoys too, and then we're going to have a real one that actually breaks apart.
Here's what it is. PCG starts running Hydra mounts from GBRS group, and then all hell breaks loose.
If you guys want to spend your money on that,
we'll get sponsored.
DJ, please. I need it for me.
Please. We're going to start a fake feud.
Yeah.
Bro, tell Mike Glover I'll never pull the trigger on an empty chamber again. Just please send me some balls.
Well, it's actually funny. Like, so when I was in high school, I was in a law enforcement class, and that
IRS agent thing.
No, it was
a wheelchair.
No, I was more like the son in Breaking Bad, where I just had the crutches and I talked funny.
Oh yeah.
But no, it was to create my foundation for my FBI CIA career as the spooky sleeper agent. No, but we did we had this law enforcement class, and our teacher was like this it's like 30-year cop in some like inner city shithole, and he would just like, I don't know, like once every month or every other month he would put on a movie that was like law enforcement related, but we would watch like Dirty Harry and 21 Jump Street and shit. This guy was hilarious because he was some retired cop that was just trying to fucking dick around. But anyway, he actually told us about like the training scars thing, where he was saying that like this guy came in and he went to do his like qualification course of fire, and he was shooting and shooting, and then before he knew it, he was out of ammo like way before it was done. And then there was like all these live rounds on the ground, and then his thing was like, oh yeah, like he had been practicing so much at home of like pulling the trigger and racking the slide that he just did it for his qual. And at the time I was like, all right, whatever, like I didn't think anything of it. And now I'm like, that guy was a fucking idiot. He should not have been a cop. If that's what makes your brain twist into knot, like fuck you. You cannot handle living on the streets. You're gonna get killed in the streets, man.
Or Mike Glover was right.
Yeah,
I don't know how long. I don't know how long y'all have been like in the shooting world or anything like that. I admittedly haven't been in it that
last
long,
week.
but I do remember. Yeah, this morning.
I didn't buy my first gun until
I
last
bought
week.
everything. Yeah, I bought everything
My
last
gun's-
night.
My gun's in the mail.
I bought it in preparation for this podcast, but USPS delayed it because of my background check.
I'm still waiting the wait time that Washington has on my 5 Glocks.
But Postal CAG intercepted my package, so I don't have my gun.
God. But so I remember there was a time where it was a really big point of contention to bring up like anything like gamery, like competition shooting, and then like tactical stuff.
Oh yeah,
I remember that it did exist. There was it still
I remember
does,
that
but
too.
like you don't see it as much. Yeah, I remember it too. It was this morning. But,
I started it.
no, it's pretty nuts how like some people still like stick to that. There's a merit for both, but like one of I always thought the funniest one was like, yeah, you're not going to know the difference between racking your slide and like look. Like, you know, like if you were dry firing and you keep racking your slide, like, yeah, he's just going to rack his slide after every round. It's like, dude, you really can't expect this dude to be that fucking stupid.
Well, I've seen Mike Glover shoot, and he's not a fucking good shooter. Like, hot
Because he's a
take, I
businessman.
guess.
It's not a hot take. He's a businessman.
But like
Man.
most SF dudes aren't that good as shooters. I'm sorry, they've got a lot of other shit to worry about.
I've always.
I think it depends, like what you're.
It really depends on the
goal is.
SF dude. The weird thing with Glover too is he was doing the stuff that should have made him a really good shooter. He was doing like a lot of the direct action stuff, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's like all
So,
he
like-
did in Iraq for the most part. Was,
Like it's way more excusable if you're like a Green Beret that's like only done like unconventional warfare stuff, and you're just like, yeah, do the Afghans shoot for me? And it's like, all right, I guess.
yeah.
But like,
I mean, it's the same thing too. Like in the Marine Corps, like as a non-infantryman, like I see so many of my fellow pogues that are absolutely horrendous with shooting, and then like you'll see all the moto stuff. It'll be like every Marine is a rifleman. I'm like, well, riflemen fucking suck because I've seen half these guys shoot. But then like sometimes even like you go to with the actual infantry guys, and you're like, well, it's combat accuracy. Like you're just flinging around the other direction.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not like you're going to take
accuracy by
contact.
volume.
Yeah, you're not going to take contact from a tree line 300 meters away and lay down and instantly just start zipping dudes right in the forehead. I mean, they did that in Fallujah, and there was like a whole thing. Like, I don't know how much of this is like ACOG Trigicon propaganda and how much of this is real. Apparently, once like the Marines started getting issued ACOGs for everybody, because originally only like team leaders and squad leaders and shit did. They were like using these baiting techniques in Fallujah, where they were planning like IED making materials, and anybody that would pick them up. Oh no, that was a separate issue actually. Yeah, for the baiting, anybody that would pick up these materials, they would shoot them because they figured that they were up to no good. But anyway, the investigation happened because after all these guys got issued ACOGs, there was all these like dead dudes that were found with like dead Iraqis with like bullet holes right in their head. And so they were like, oh, well, they must be executing these guys. And then it turns out that like the combat accuracy was so good with the ACOG, and like the only visible thing from these like the opposing force was like their head when they would pop up through windows to shoot. So I don't know, it's probably just like Trigicon planted propaganda, but
it probably is, but it's 100% true.
I believe it because I want to.
That's one thing that I have pondered on how to train and if to train it is just the accuracy through volume. Yeah.
I dry fire executions.
I do not need to train executions. That shit comes naturally, brother. Are you kidding me right now?
Who remembers that Lucas Botkin video where he walked up to the car.
Oh,
and
dude, I
behind
love
his
that
back
one.
that he took down. Yeah, I love that video.
I love that one, and the one where he's
Here's the
sitting behind the
community.
table. The one where he's sitting behind the
Yeah.
table, just flips it and pulls out the handgun and shoots the target across from him. Those are so good.
Yeah. But yeah, so how to train like accuracy
For
through
rollers.
volume.
Oh.
Like do you train that? Like or does that just come naturally where like you take contact and you just start flinging rounds and then go into like your more accurate-sized shooting skill set?
It's kind of one
No,
of
you
those.
don't train. You just shoot,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, honestly, too, like a lot of guys that are in firefights like don't even remember looking through their sights. Like,
Yeah.
they're especially too like most of the guys with combat experience now got it in a desert area, so like most of their experience is like, yeah, we saw occasional muzzle flashes and we knew the general direction of them, but there's so much fucking dust we just shot.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like that combat accuracy. And yeah, there's always that time where it's like yeah, you can see the enemy and you put your sights on them and pull the trigger kind of deal, but the overwhelming majority of firefights in Iraq and Afghanistan over the last 20 years have just been like, yeah, we just kind of shot into dust, and then eventually the fire stopped and we went over there and found like blood on the ground because they would just drag their bodies away, and we assumed that it was, X amount killed.
And that's what I've noticed whenever I've done force on force, and I've done everything from Airsoft to like Sims. I actually went through the Navy's VBSS opposed boarding school, which was very interesting. One of my cadre was actually, have you guys ever seen Deadliest Warrior?
Yeah, dude, I love that show.
The Navy SEAL that did that knife kill on the gelatin body.
Oh, the big
That was
black
one of
guy
my
that went
yeah,
sicko
the
mode
big
on it.
black- yeah. And so he was one of my cadre, but yeah, we had Sims, and it was actually a pretty good course. The CQB was a little old school, but
He just
yeah,
ran
I
in
don't
with the
remember.
knife. Yeah, it's
Started
old school.
stabbing
Pulls out a
dudes.
sword.
But yeah, I didn't remember seeing much of my sights, and we had like aim points and stuff. So
A lot of like. close
I think
quarter
it's
stuff
just
like that,
muscle
too, is, like-
memories.
yeah, it's like point shooting a lot too when you get that close.
Yep. Yeah.
Because like we've done like 5 meter shooting, like 25 to 5, and like yeah, you're running an aim 4 or an M4 with an ACOG, so it's 4 times, but like generally at like 25 and 15, like you can still raise it up, put sights on target, but once you get to 5, even if you're trying to shoot in like the T box, you can pretty much just like look where you want to shoot and pull it up and pull the trigger, and like both eyes open over the gun, you'll just see the holes kind of appear where you want, because you're so fucking close. It's like if you miss, it's a fraction of a miss, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I don't think that you shouldn't present the gun like you're gonna see your sights, but as far as like getting that crisp red dot, you might see a flash of red, but you're not gonna like see the red dot steady on the T box and then press the trigger. It's gonna be faster than that.
And that's like kind of one thing. Like normally,
Just shoot better.
yeah, honestly, skill issue. One thing that I really like is just the EOTech in general. Like on one of my guns, I have an EOTech in magnifier. On another one, I have an aim point on an overbore mount, and then on like my main rifle I'm using now, I put an LPVO on it not too long ago, because I had an LPVO before, but it was a cheaper one. It was a Vortex Strike Eagle, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the LPVO thing, but I figured maybe I just had a shitty one, so I should get like a decent one. And now that I've been shooting with it, I'm still like not a fan. And part of it too is like on true 1X, you still get scope shadow, you still get like these issues. So like have you guys ran like the T-Rex Arms like 50 round carbine
No.
course of fire? Okay, well there's
No, it's on the list. We're definitely gonna do it as a group here soon.
I really like it, mostly because like kind of like what Gio was talking about earlier with like the competition shooting versus tactical shooting. At the end of the day, competition shooting is rated by your hit factor. Like how long did it take you to get good accurate hits on target? And that's how you know who's better. Hey, it took this person less time and they got more A zone hits.
It's more quantifiable.
Well, that too, like the thing that I like about the T-Rex Arms one, and I'll probably end up making my own, just for me and my guys, is that you get the whole course of fire, you get how to score, everything that you need to know is on the sheet. It tells you the target layout, everything, and then you just go through each drill. You time it, you write it down, and then you calculate it, and then you can save the piece of paper, obviously, and then you can see like, okay, I'm consistently improving, and there's stuff all the way from 5-meter headshots all the way back to move from the 25 to the 5 and shoot 4 rounds on each target. So there's 3 targets, so there's a lot of different drills that kind of come together to make like a well-rounded foundation. And obviously, it's not practicing tactics. It's not like a dynamic poo-poo pee-pee situation where, you're doing mental stress and all this other shit. It's literally just like, hey, how good are you at shooting? How good are you with manipulating, your rifle? How good are you at running it in kit? Things like that. But like the hit factor thing is a really important tool to use that so many people I don't think even use it. Like, yeah, sometimes me and my guys will like have these kind of more like intricate drills to run where it's a lot of moving and running from point to point. But like you're not timing it. You're doing it on steel, so you only know if you got hits. Worst case is like, oh, okay, you had X amount of misses, go work out, go PT or something like that. So I can't remember what my original point was, but yeah, competition shooting, it works fine.
Yeah, and you really have to, I'd say, break down each individual skill set. Like even running in a drill can take away from kind of showing who is the better shooter, because now you're adding fitness into it. And then once you get into like larger scale stuff, if you're shooting, moving, and then reloading, and then maybe like putting a tourniquet on, well, now you can't really quantify like how good were you at like putting a tourniquet on, how good were you at your split times, how good were you at your reload. Like if you really want a good baseline of how good you are at each individual task, you have to like separate those tasks. And then once you like have a baseline on those, you put them all together into like a final drill of the day.
Yeah. And there's like a lot of stuff too, like small things that you can slip in, like, have your buddy load your mags and know that, if you know the whole course of fire is going to be 20 rounds, take out 20 rounds and, 2-3 empty mags and just load it randomly. So the buddy that's shooting doesn't know how many rounds he's going to have in each mag, but then it'll train that like instinctive reactive bolt lock reload. So that's like one thing too, because like when you're doing drills for bolt lock reloads, what you're about to do, how many rounds you're going to shoot, you are expecting that reload. And it's especially true with like, types of rifles where they don't lock back on empty, like MP5s or roller delay blowback guns, AK, stuff like that. That stuff is a lot more important too, is like being able to react to that click and just instantly put a new mag in it. So there's a lot of different shit you can do for that.
For sure.
So what are your guys's, I'm going to change topics.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what are your guys's goals for the future? Like, what are you guys really trying to see, within your organization, or, just kind of like for yourselves?
Better execution.
Marshall, you want to go first?
Yeah, so granted, I'm not the one who originally like started the PCG, so I don't want to speak for the organization, but what I foresee in the PCG moving forward is like expanding like the knowledge base of things that people don't like talk about. Like I talked about like that food efficiency stuff earlier, which is something like a topic that people may not really think about in the classic like overarching concepts of like tactical preparedness and stuff. And in those like little knowledge like drops, being able to like get more conversations started, and starting to like kind of hit these little esoteric like pockets of knowledge that people don't think about, right? And start getting conversation going. And I know that Cameron had mentioned at one point like taking the PCG like to the community and getting people out there and getting their stuff out there and starting, you know, some like rudimentary like community building in person. And so I'm excited for the PCG because when they came to us and kind of adopted me and another buddy of mine for our like little specialized skill set that we had about, you know, like mountainous long range shooting, that I got to see the other members that were there and kind of their individual skill sets that were unique. You know, like we had a pilot at one point and, you know, like a K9 handler, and being able to have those assets, right. And being able to build this team just beyond riflemen and go into other concepts of like preparedness, like exit strategies. You know, having a pilot is an incredible thing. Like what a incredible thing to have in your arsenal to be able to pull from, and get guys to places, you know, or things like that. A signals guy or a guy with a K9, right? These are extra assets. And so I was excited to continue like building up people that have these like more like esoteric skill sets or like things that people don't think about and bringing them together. So, you know, trying not to just be another run of the mill like rifleman team, but actually get people that have very niche and esoteric things to think about. But I know that Cameron has got some things he wanted to take, you know, like get the PCG to develop into. So
yeah, so actually, one of the things we're looking at doing here soon, I got the idea from Geo actually, is doing a community ruck and just taking people who, you know, you don't need a lot. You just need a backpack that, you know, maybe should have a frame, heavy. Like, yeah, heavy backpack. Hopefully it has a frame on it so your back won't break. But just going out and doing a couple miles, nothing too crazy paced, and just chatting about the community, where things are at. And then it's just a good way for people to meet people, for PCG to meet people. And I give credit to Geo with that one. Another thing we are actually taking a look into, and this is probably more in the distant future, but tactical tailoring is on our radar. We have a lot of gear ideas that we've taken from lessons learned out in the mountains that we would like to bring to market as kind of niche products that they may work for you and they may not work for you, but we built them because we know that they will work for us and our needs. So stuff like that. And yeah, just continuing to train. We really like to diversify our training locations and opportunities, so we're not always in the same AOR. The mine trip is one of them. Yeah, the 1 or 2 AORs. Like we get out and we go Eastern Washington. We'll go to down south where the Olympic Peninsula is, and fuck around in the rainforest down there. You know, we really like to kind of experience new things and train in new AORs with different taskers and stuff. So there's things coming down the pipeline. We want to keep growing and keep collaborating with like other groups and stuff, and we'll see where things take us.
Nice.
Yeah. And that's like a big thing too, is just, I don't know. There's things that can be gained from talking to people that work in other regions. And it's obvious, no shit when I say that, but like for you guys, the training that you do and the things that you focus on and your main considerations when you're packing and planning and executing and all that stuff is ultimately going to be different than me because of environmental factors. But there's still a lot of stuff that, guys from regions like mine or Geos or even the Southwest or whatever can gain from you guys. Is just like, different instances of how to pack or whatever. And it's like,
Hey, a combat load is still a combat load, you know. 8
Yeah.
mags is pretty standard.
yeah. And something as simple as even like field stripping MREs. So
Yep.
if you don't need to carry as much food where you're at, you're not going to be as like cognitive of it. But then, there is a thing that it was like a while ago actually in Geo. I know that you posted something recently, but I posted a picture of like how much I had taken out because I was field stripping MREs and I had like 3 or 4, and just all the stuff I took out, like the bulk of it versus the stuff that's in. And I just posted like on my story, and I was getting questions from people like, oh, what should I take out? And it's like, man, that's up to you. Like, I don't like the beverage powder, so I take all that shit out, but you might fucking love it, so keep it, I guess. Like, I'm not going to tell you what food to bring or not to bring. Like, you're an adult, you should be able to dress yourself. But, just stuff like that. Like, there's so many things like that a lot of people don't have the, I guess, luxury of being forced on them. Like, that's, it's not like a matter of like military is better than police or they're better than civilians or whatever. It's like, we just have different experiences, and the field living thing, if you're in certain branches of the military or certain jobs or whatever, the field environment is going to be a lot more natural to you because you had no choice and you just went to it for, however many years and however many times. So, like all these little nuances and tricks and, hey, when I pack my ruck, I do it this way because I know that, it's going to work out for me better. And, guys that are just getting into this, I think that there's still like that kind of divide in people's head where they think that there's a lot more like bro vets than there really are. And they'll be like, oh, like, XYZ, something bad about guys in the military. And it's like, well, there's a lot that you can learn from them, and there's a lot that they can learn from you too. So just kind of work together, right? Like, I'm not opposed to having like, somebody who's a cop in my group, if they kind of fit the mold of what I'm looking for, because they're going to have a lot of things that I'm not going to necessarily have, like how to de-escalate situations or whatever. I mean, certain cops, they'll just call out taser and pull out their Glock, but
Dude, that was in many. That's my fucking hometown. That was fucking George Floyd, and that chick is so cringe, bro. It's fucking silliness.
I'm still trying to see if we can get a cop on the podcast.
We could,
like a militia-minded cop or whatever.
Like a good one.
Yeah, a good cop.
Yeah.
But that's
because it's dude. Like everyone's been discounting cops so hard, but like in my opinion, for most of the calamities that people are expecting, you're gonna need police skills more than probably anything else, because you're probably gonna be doing
people
a lot
management
of detention.
skills.
You're going to need people management. You're going to need to know, hey, this is how you fucking cuff someone. This is how you throw them into a truck. This is how you take them to, wherever. This is how you deal with these people. This is how you fix these problems. And even just a local cop is going to know, hey, these are the shitty areas of town. These are the areas you avoid.
Yeah.
These are the gangs in your area. And this is their colors, and this is how they recognize each other.
They're going to have so much like on the job intel that you're never going to know, because it's the same thing. Like, right. Yeah. Military, a lot of the guys that are in like combat arms jobs have lived in the field. So they know all these like little tips and tricks, and they know what to look for certain things or not to look for. They know, what certain signs of field related, ailments can be. It's kind of the same thing with cops. Like, they have all this knowledge of their AO, and they know the streets, they know what connects to what, they know what streets are shut down, they know which ones are busy, they know which ones are more infested with gangs, they know the colors, like, they know all that stuff, and most of all, they know how to talk to all these people. And not only that, but they know how to talk to all of them with a giant target on their back.
Yep. Going back to Tyler, what you said, like, about experience, that's one of my biggest problems with this whole, like, social media movement towards info sharing is, at a certain point you just got to go out and do it, and you can't ask the question, what's the best ruck, 1,000 times to 1,000 different. Yeah, exactly. And you just got to go out and do it, and then take your own data, because like we've kind of highlighted in this podcast, like, everyone's situation is different, whether it be your AO, your end goal, your fitness, like, everyone's situation is different. So what works for, and it's so cliche to say because you hear it all the time, but literally what works for you might not work for me and vice versa. You just got to go out and test your own stuff and really, really think about your end goal, because a lot of people see us rucking around the mountains or you guys training in your AO and you're like, well, that's what I need to start training now. Well, why are you training that, right? Like, why are you putting on combat gear if your plan when things go down is to stay low key because you've got a couple thousand acres of property and you just want to like farm your animals and like not make a mess? Like, why are you training what you're training, and is what you're training working for you?
Yeah, 100%. And
My little rant.
Yeah.
I fully agree with that. Like, the training stuff that isn't going to be conducive to your intended outcome for what you're training for doesn't make sense. So if your entire basis around training, like you said, is for you to just, stay home and do property defense and all that stuff, like, you're not going to have to work intently on like doing full on, vehicle resupplies and convoy operations and all that shit. Like, you should be worrying about how quickly can you walk to different points on your land? How did you range it? Do you have range cards set up? Does your family know these range cards? Do they know, how the light, rises and affects your sight picture at different times of the day, right? If you're going to potentially need to defend your homestead at a certain time, is the light going to be shining in your eyes? Is it going to be behind you shining in the enemy's eyes? Like, what are the avenues of approach? Stuff like that. Like, focus on your area more. And then one thing too that I see a lot is like people pushing hard to avoid urban areas. And like, I see why you would want to, and I agree that it would, like, it sucks, but at the end of the day, urban areas and cities and all that stuff are always going to be key critical points, and they're going to be very important to hold and maintain. And that's where the majority of the fighting is going to be, because that's where everybody wants to control. Like, there's so many reasons to want to control, an urban environment. And so if the scenario is that, some country invades the US and they start taking over cities, and you realize that now your supply of certain things is going to be cut off because they're, whatever, like, what are you going to do? Just sit there and wait to rot? Or you're going to take everybody in your family and move them to another area when you don't have any supplies and you're running low? Like, no, you're probably going to have to go in there and figure something out. So there's not like a good excuse to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to avoid the cities, unless you literally live in like an insanely rural off-grid area and you have everything for you and you can completely sustain yourself without, power or anything like that for years, so.
Well, and I also love when dudes live in absolutes. Like, you'll hear dudes say, well, this is exactly what I'm going to do when the shit hits the fan. I'm never going to go in the city, and I'm never going to practice CQB, and because I just won't do CQB. Well, okay.
I'll just burn the house down.
Yeah, like, I'm glad you've made up your mind about that, but someone else probably has a say in that scenario as well. Like, the, crackhead that has your wife hostage in your own house. Like, okay, I'm just not going to do CQB. Roger that. You know?
Yeah, exactly. There was something too that earlier today I had I made like a post about urban sightlines, and just the fact that, like, just to keep in mind that there's long sightlines in urban environments too, right? For me, I generally go opposite of what a lot of people say, where they're like, oh, if you're in the woods, you need a long range gun. If you're in the city, you need a short range gun. Like, usually in the woods, I have a lot less of a distance of a sight line, or like a lot shorter distance of a sight line. Because
that's us as well. Yeah,
occasionally, like, I'll come up on a larger field or something like that, but it's usually only a couple hundred meters across. And then, like, if you have a linear danger area, it can be a couple 100 meters straight, but then it turns and curves. Whereas you go in the city, especially the cities that are built like a grid, and you'll have a mile of just straight distance. And especially for for a lot of cities that are, flat, it's like your LDA that you're crossing has somebody potentially on a mile away watching down that whole street for 2 miles, So there was, I don't know. I had originally posted it in the Telegram first, and there was like, I don't know, people kind of acting like the absolute thing. Like either guys are going to be carrying a Mark 13 like bolt action long range rifle, or they're going to be carrying like SIG rattlers. Like there's no in between. And it's like, well, why not just not do either of those things? Like there's so many options within that. Or like
Fred talked about it once. Living in absolutes is just like probably the dumbest thing you could do when we're literally training for something we don't even know, like the scenario that we're training for. We are trying to train so broadly for such a wide case of scenarios, but dudes are living like, oh, I won't need to go resupply in a city because I'll just have all the food on hand. I'll just stock my shelves with canned goods. Like, okay, you do that, buddy. Like, just don't bother me because you're probably going to get yourself killed.
Well, that's like why things like the tactical decision games and stuff are so great, because like, yeah, that particular instance or scenario I might never encounter, but like I was saying before, you're given a scenario that's less than ideal, and you have to navigate out of it. And like, there was one that I did where essentially your goal is to drive to another area where that there's another friendly group located, and you need to give them a resupply because they've been in this area for a little while now. Say it's like an abandoned factory, or I can't remember what I said it was. I think it was an abandoned factory. So I gave out like a layout of, okay, these are the vehicles you have. You have, I think it was like 2 Tacomas, 2 F-150s, an F-250, and a Jeep Wrangler. You have supplies, you have like a squad, so 13-man team or whatever, or maybe it was 2 squads, something like that. But basically I laid out all this stuff, and I was saying that the area that you're going to be driving through is intermittent woodland with a couple of small towns scattered, and there's been reports of IEDs in the area. So I'm not saying that there's going to be IEDs on the road, and I'm not going to say that you're going to get blown up by an IED. I'm just going to say, there's been reports. So it's like all these things, and then, okay, the mission is to take these supplies that you have of food, water, ammo, all that stuff, and bring it to the other group. You have to take this route because the other routes are either blockaded or are way too out of the way, and your fuel consumption considerations make this the only feasible option. How do you navigate this town? Just the way the timeline is, you're leaving at 9 a.m., for example. So like, you're getting handed a situation that is realistic, and it's very less than optimal. Like, yeah, obviously you'd want to travel at night, or travel during a different time than like 9 a.m. when everybody's already up and about, and they're not tired from the day or whatever. And you have to pass through this town, you have to pass through these areas, you're afraid that there might be IEDs. Like, all this stuff comes into play. And like I said, are you going to be given that situation at some point in your life? I don't know. And that's the key thing, is like, just, hey, I'm being handed the situation, I need to figure it out. And so doing exercises like that, or like the map exercise that Gio was talking about, are like, very, very, very valuable, because even though you might not be dealing with that exact circumstance in the future, it's not pointless to dwell on or figure out.
Yep, agreed.
But yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up. Thanks for coming on, guys. I'm sure that there's gonna be more stuff that we'll think of in the future to cover, and you guys will probably come back on.
Yeah.
Unless you guys think that that's enough of talking to us, but
honestly, I'm pretty disappointed with this whole thing. Kind of a waste of 2 hours. So,
dude, I say that every single week, and then every other week, on
I'm back on it.
Yeah, me and Gio are talking. We're like, I guess we'll do it again this week. Yeah. Well, it's like,
no, it was good. It was a good podcast.
It's like gambling. It's like, if you quit, you're just about to get $6 zillion.
Yeah.
Like, you can't ever quit, because then eventually you'll hit it big.
Yeah, I don't see the comparison to the podcast, but for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can never quit.
Yeah, because eventually it'll be good. It'll be rewarding.
Eventually, it'll reach Joe Rogan levels of like.
We're just gonna open the mailbox and it's gonna be a bunch of like wadded up cash in there.
It's gonna be in money bags,
Thanks
dude.
for your podcast.
It's gonna be in the big bags with the money sign on it.
Eventually, you're gonna open your mailbox and it's just gonna be a small little orange card and it's just a get out of jail free card, but it actually works. Like, well, sir,
it actually works.
You're gonna get a DM with like Elon Musk with the check mark and be like, "Hey guys, I heard you had a pretty good podcast.
You guys
want to
get the
smoke
blue
some
check
weed?"
Mark card. The blue check mark pass.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, once again, thanks for coming on, guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.